So it's good to see everybody today post Passover. We haven't met in a couple of weeks because of the holiday. And so nothing like getting back to Torah study with the most disgusting portions in the entire Torah in terms of content, and that is Tazria-Metzora. I say that with all love and reverence for the Torah. So please don't understand that I'm insulting the Torah in any way. It's just that if you compare the subject matter of Tazria-Metzora, a second here. If you compare the subject matter of Tazria-Metzora to, let's say, Yitro with the Ten Commandments, it's night and day in terms of the topic. So talking about God's revelation at Mount Sinai and that awesome experience that the entire community of Israel had at Mount Sinai versus things that flow from our body and what status it makes us and how to purify ourselves. Again, like I said, it's quite different, but in the overall context of the Torah, it's all about the sanctity of life, elements of life that increase our holiness, and other elements of life that might impact our holiness. So with that, let me say the blessing for Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So this, as we understand, and I've always mentioned, or mentioned very frequently, Torah portions do not exist in a vacuum. They are within context. So, one more person coming in. So our portion, Tazria-Metzora, which begins on page 649 in our Eitz Chaim, chapter 12 of Leviticus, in whatever edition of Chumash you're using. It's actually a double portion this week, Tazria and Metzora. So again, in some ways, it's a good thing we're getting all of the disgusting stuff over with in 1 week. We have to understand this in context. So last week's portion, Shemini, included in it the listing of animals, birds, and fish that we are allowed to consume and not allowed to consume, and also the creepy crawlies that we're not allowed to consume either. So those things make us, if we touch a carcass of any one of those forbidden animals, fish, or birds, it would make us into the category of tameh. So it is this concept of tum'ah, which is the noun for the verb tameh. It is this concept that our double portion, Tazria-Metzora, deals with this week. So again, we're on 649 in the Eitz Chaim. So if you have the red Eitz Chaim, 649, whatever edition of Chumash you have, look for Leviticus chapter 12, the portion Tazria. So the religious, there are three main religious concepts that the book of Leviticus especially focuses on. There's the concept of Kedusha, which is most easily and commonly translated as holiness. Okay, so I'm writing it out in Hebrew, and then the other words too. Okay, so these are the three words that the portion Leviticus focuses on. So kedusha is the first word from the word kadosh, which means holy. Okay. The other two words are first tahara, which means purity, and tum'ah, which means the opposite of tahara. Again, most easily translated as impurity. So these are religious, spiritual concepts that apply to objects and applies to people and applies to space, right? So we're told that some items, after they're used in the Mishkan and later in the temple, have to be taken to a makom tahor, a pure place, or a makom tameh, to an impure place. Okay, so places can be tahor and tameh. They can also be kadosh, holy. So the idea then is, what happens? How can a person be tahor? How can a person be tameh? And does it have anything to do with behavior? Okay, so clearly for objects and places, behavior doesn't apply, because how can an object or a place act? They are inanimate objects, right? So you can't say that an object is bad or good. It just is. A chair. Is there anything bad about a chair? Well, the only thing bad about it would be how we sit in it, right? Or how it is constructed, and in terms of what it does to our body or our backs or our tushes as we sit in it. Okay, so there could be comfortable chairs, but it's comfortable for the person sitting in it. The chair in and of itself is not objectively on its own good or bad. It just is. Okay, so all objects and places then are there's no behavior that makes it tahor or tameh. It's all about then just what it has in it that would make it tahor or tameh. So an object would be tahor if it contains something that is tahor. Okay, so let's say a kiddush cup, for example, could be tahor, and especially if it has sacred wine or grape juice in it. But if it has a liquid that is tameh, then the object becomes tameh. Okay, so I'm spending some moments on this just so that we can understand that just because a person could be having a flow from their body that renders them impure doesn't mean that the person, him or herself, is impure, which then caused that impurity to flow from them. Okay, so that element of the discussion is important to understand why someone would have leprosy, the so-called leprosy, when we get to that in this portion, because that's a main thing that the end of Tazria and most of Metzora talks about. That is someone who has this particular skin of ailment or skin affliction, which is commonly translated as leprosy, but is not leprosy. It's some kind of rash or raised colored skin on the skin that a Kohen has to investigate. So for the rabbis suggest that the person did something wrong in order to, which caused the affliction to happen. From the Torah, that's not the case. Okay, so it's important for us to know as we read these portions that these are just things that happen naturally. They don't happen according to the Torah based on behavior. Okay, so for example, let's just start reading the portion 649 in Eitz Chaim or chapter 12 of Leviticus, in whatever edition of Chumash you're using. Vayedaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. God spoke to Moses, saying, Daber el bnei Yisrael lemor. Speak to the people of Israel and say, Isha ki Tazria, a woman who Isha ki Tazria, a woman, I'm going to translate it literally, a woman who puts forward seed. So Zoreya is to sow, S-O-W, okay, not S-E-W. So to put seeds in the ground is to sow. So Tazria means to cause seeds to come out of the ground. Okay, to produce, no, to put forward seed. So the ground could produce seed from the crop that is planted in it. A person could put forward seed, a woman, in giving birth. Okay, so to Tazria means to give forth seed. So our Eitz Chaim translates it at childbirth. Okay, so a woman who puts forward seed and gives birth, v'yalda zachar, and gives birth to a male child, v'tam'a shivat yamim, she will be tameh, she will be impure for 7 days. Okay, so the act of childbirth makes her impure. Not that she was a bad or a good person and gave birth and became impure. No, just the act of childbirth itself makes the woman impure. So for a male child, she becomes impure for 7 days. Kiemei nidat devota titma. As her days of menstruation, the period of her menstruation, she will be impure. Okay, so a woman, so this implies that we know already that when a woman each month has her cycle, she is impure for 7 days. Okay, so that is in addition to the days that she bleeds. Okay, so there are the bleeding days, and then there are, when the bleeding stops, then 7 days of impurity. Okay, so the 7 days of impurity, like menstruation, applies to giving birth to a boy. Okay, uvayom hashmini, and on the 8th day, yimol besar orlato, his foreskin should be circumcised. The flesh of his foreskin should be circumcised. So that's a parenthetical note, because this is about the impurity, not about circumcision. It just happens to mention, oh, by the way, she's impure for 7 days. The 8th day, there'll be a circumcision. But then, verse 4, ushloshim yom, ushloshet yamim teshev bidemei tahara. For 33 days, she will sit in blood of purity or purification. It will take her 33 days to become purified after the 7 days of impurity. Bechol kodesh lo tiga, she's not allowed to touch anything holy. Ve'el hamikdash lo tavo, to the sanctuary she cannot enter. Ad melot yemei tahara, until she has fulfilled her days of purification. Okay, so it's a total of 40 days, 7 days of impurity, 33 days of purification, 7 and 33, 40 days for a boy. Until then, she is purified. Ve'im nekeva teleid, if she gives birth to a girl, v'tam'a shivu'ayim kenidata. Oh, she's impure for 2 weeks. 14 days she has to sit in impurity for giving birth to a girl. V'shishim yom v'sheshet yamim teshev al demei tahara. And she sits in purification for 66 days. So 14 and 66 adds up to 80. So it's double the amount of time. Double the impurity time, 2 weeks instead of 1 week. Double the purification time, 66 instead of 33. Why? It doesn't say. Does not say why a girl, or giving birth to a girl, causes the mother to be impure double the amount of time, and purification needs double the amount of time too. That we don't know. That we'd have to look below the line for some made-up ideas about why that would be the case. So, verse 6 continues, Uvim lot yemei tahara, as she has fulfilled the days of her purification, leven olevat, for a son or for a daughter. So, she completes the 66 days for a girl, the 33 days of purification for a boy. What should she do? Tavi keves ben shnato la'olah. She should bring a year-old sheep for a burnt offering. And uven yonah otur lechatat, or a dove or a pigeon, okay, a pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering. El petach ohel moed el hakohen, to the entrance to the tent of meeting, to the kohen. Okay, so as a gift of a burnt offering and a gift of a sin offering. So what is the sin that she has committed in giving birth to a child? That's the question. We don't know. What is the sin? So, okay, so we'll look below the line momentarily. Okay, so she has to bring a year-old sheep and a turtle dove or a pigeon, for first as a burnt offering and second the bird for the sin offering. Vehi krivo lifnei Adonai, and he, that is the Kohen, will offer it before God. Vechiper aleha, and atone for her. Vitahara mimakor dameha, and purify her from the source of her blood. So what's the atoning? Again, what's the sin that she committed? What's the atoning that she requires? Zot Torah hayoledet lazachar o lenekeva. This is the law for a woman who gives birth to a boy, to a male or a female. And verse 8, Ve'im lo timtza yada deiseh, if she could not be able to find, or we could translate this as afford, she couldn't afford a seh, which is a sheep or a goat, so they're interchangeable. She could bring a year-old goat or a year-old sheep, and that is a seh. If she could not do that, v'lakcha shtei torim o shnei bnei yonah. So then she takes 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, one for the burnt offering, one for the sin offering. V'chiper aleha kohen v'tahera, and the kohen will atone for her and purify her. Okay, so we do know, by the way, that if you've been to the old city of Jerusalem and been to where the egalitarian kotel is, if you go down below, we'll take the steps down, walk the ancient steps down to the bottom level, where you can't go down anymore. That's street level, and there are archways there. And we're told that these archways were where vendors were for people coming to the temple to bring offerings. So if you don't want to, it's like signs, last gas before you get for 30 miles. You see that on the highway. So this is the last chance to get your animals or birds for sacrifice to the Kohen. So if you don't want to schlep a bird or an animal with you from the Galilee, you can know that you can buy it there at the temple. The closer you get to the temple, of course, the more expensive it's going to be, right? But there were vendors of pigeons and turtle doves right there in those archways, right underneath the egalitarian kotel that exists there today, for women to bring their sacrifice after giving birth. So it would be a very popular place. Yes, Sumner.
Yeah, excuse me. What is burnt offering?
What is a burnt offering? Okay, so in the first chapters of Leviticus, we had a description of the variety of sacrifices that would be offered on the altar. There's a description of a burnt offering. There's a description of a sin offering. There's a description of a guilt offering. There's a description of a peace offering. So those are the four main kinds of sacrifices that would be brought, as well as the daily sacrifice that would happen every morning, the daily offering that would be brought in the afternoon, and the fire that would be kept burning on the altar in the evening, plus holiday sacrifices, if that was the time, or Shabbat sacrifices too. So you have to look to the first chapters in Leviticus for the description of the burnt offering, the sin offering, the guilt offering, and the well-being or peace offering. So those are the four main types. Okay, so childbirth then requires a sin offering. What would that be for? So if we look below the line here, and then I want to go back to 649 to read some more introductory stuff. Let's first look below the line here on 651 about these offerings that she brings. The new mother's burnt offering is seen by some as a form of an offering of gratitude, todah. That's another one, by the way. So there are five. There's olah, there's chatat, asham, shlamim, todah. Okay, todah means thanks, gratitude. So there are five possible types, besides the others I said, the daily offering, a holiday, Shabbat, that kind of thing. So the new mother's burnt offering is seen by some as a form of an offering of gratitude for having survived the experience of childhood, or on behalf of the newborn for having been released into life from the confinement of the womb. Okay, so that we can understand. Bring a sacrifice of gratitude. That could be what the olah is for. Okay, that makes sense, right? In today's day and world, you'd have some kind of Thanksgiving prayer to say, like at a baby naming or at a bris. There are prayers that parents say in gratitude for the birth of their child. Okay, why a purification offering? The sin offering, the chatat, which could be translated as sin offering or purification offering, right? So at the end of verse 6 up above, translated the word chatat as purification offering. I translate it as sin offering because it's from the root chet, tet, aleph, which means sin. Okay, so why does she have to bring a sin offering? What does she do wrong? Because I just said, in my intro to understanding purification and impurity, that it has nothing to do with behavior. It's just what happens to when our body is doing something, it could make us impure. So her body did something. She gave birth to a child. Okay, so what behavior was she acting in a good way or a bad way to cause her to be bringing a sin offering? That's the question. Why a purification offering? Hoffman sees it as the sacrifice of one compelled by circumstance to stay away from the sanctuary, who now brings a dove to symbolize her return to her spiritual home, like a dove to its nest. Okay, so perhaps if we understand the word chatat as purification, so now bringing the turtle dove or the pigeon is symbolizes, just as a pigeon or a dove returns to its nest, the woman is now returning to her state of purification, of holiness, of sanctity. So that's one idea. The other idea, the Talmud speculates that some women, because of the pain of childbirth, may have vowed to abstain from further sexual relations to avoid such pain. The offering is part of the process that releases her from that rash vow. Okay, so if we have experienced childbirth through our spouses, the younger we are, the more likely it was that we were in the room with them when they were giving birth. So if we were in the room with them, and depending on how long labor is going, our wives may have said some things that would not have been so pleasant to hear because of the pain. Oh, I'll never do this again. I can't believe I'm going through this. What did you make me do? Et cetera, as the contractions are becoming more intense, right? So perhaps that's what the Talmudic rabbis are responding to, that in that fit of agony, the woman could have said, I swear I'll never go through this process again. Okay, so that rash vow then requires in a moment, or especially if it's a girl 2 months later, of thinking about it and raising this newborn daughter, to be able to then become pure from those thoughts or those words that she said. So perhaps the chatat is to make amends for those rash words that she said. Okay, so that's a funny kind of idea, but maybe not so funny. Just, the process itself can be painful, and in pain, we could be saying things or doing things that we don't mean. So the chatat, once things settle down, reflects that more settled kind of life. Yes, Sumner.
Yeah, has there been some speculation why 33 days, 66 days?
Right. Why the difference between a girl and a boy? So those differences are based on that reasons that are given for them are based on the sexist ideas of the rabbis from rabbinic time through the Middle Ages. Okay, so which is why we really don't see the explanation given here. Right. So just 1 second here. Right. Well, okay. So below the line on 650 explains the possibility of why it's 2 weeks for a girl and 1 week for a boy. All right, so that time, not the 66 versus 33, but the 2 weeks versus the 1 week, is the normal period of impurity after giving birth 1 week, and is it doubled after the birth of a daughter because the new mother has given birth to a child who will herself contain the divine gift of nurturing and giving birth to a new life? Or is the normal period 2 weeks, only to be reduced after the birth of a son to allow the mother to attend the brit, the circumcision, in a state of ritual purity, or because Brit Milah on the 8th day is a purifying rite? So in other words, should it be 2 weeks for everybody, but it's only a week for a boy so that she can attend the bris? Right? So in other words, to switch it around, instead of us thinking in a sexist way that boys are better than girls, and that 2 weeks is not a punishment, but it's just shows that girls are secondary, so that you'd have to have longer period of purification from a girl than from a boy. So that there's no adequate explanation for it, Sumner. There really isn't. And we really don't know. It could be that she's giving birth to a girl who herself, God willing, will go through the same process again when she grows up. So maybe there's that idea, and less time for a boy because a boy doesn't have all this blood that a girl has. I don't know. Anything you come up with would be making up a reason. We really don't know. Okay, and that's the thing. The Torah, so getting back, I want to get back to 649. Getting back to this idea of tameh and tahor, I can't emphasize enough that the Torah does not give us the reason why something is tameh or something is tahor. It just says it is. Okay, it's the rabbis who add a reason for it, that add a sense about there could be something with the behavior that determined whether something is tameh or tahor. Okay, so now let's look below the line on 649 for some more ideas about what tum'ah, this impurity, is all about. I want to start with the second full paragraph. So the middle on the left-hand side on 649, tum'ah has unmistakable negative connotations. It's defined by what one may not do, and the Torah tells us how to be relieved of it. It need not, however, imply wrongdoing on the part of the affected person. Admittedly, in parentheses, as some commentators have noted, the Torah itself provides a basis for that interpretation when it calls for a purification offering to be part of its prescribed process of reintegration, right? So a person afflicted with what's called leprosy has to go through a purification process, or the woman has to go through a purification process after the amount of time of childbirth and sitting apart. So it might imply, the Torah does, that there's something wrong that you have to be purified from. But it's not to be understood as something wrong. It's just something that happened. Something that happened made her or someone impure. And now here's the way to rectify oneself from that event that occurred. Blood flowing, other unusual things flowing, or skin afflictions, and how to become, once it goes away, how to become pure again. Okay, so after the parentheses, tum'ah seems to be the result of coming in contact with an awesomely potent force that disqualifies one from approaching the sanctuary. So blood could be that awesome force. The unusual liquid flowing from the body or oozing from the body could be that awesome force. And that skin affliction could be that awesome force, right? Because you haven't seen that skin affliction before on your body. Okay. It was a proof, that it goes on, proof that tum'ah is not a totally negative condition can be found not only in its association with such religiously affirmed activities as childbirth and caring for the dead, but also from the rabbinic rule that scrolls of the biblical books convey tum'ah to those who touch them. Right? So there's that idea that books of the Torah, you're not supposed to touch the Torah directly because it makes you tameh. There's this idea, not just the Torah, but in the time of the rabbis, the books of the Bible were written on scrolls. So any scroll could make you ritually impure if you touch it, kind of like a contradictory kind of idea that the book contains holiness. The words themselves are holy, but the fact that you touched it makes you tameh is just weird kind of thinking. Okay, so how could we say that there's anything wrong with the Torah? But it's a sense of this is a different category of object, and we have to beware when approaching it. And so when we touch the Torah, either when we have an aliyah, we use our talus to touch the Torah, or we use a sidur or some other object to touch the Torah and not our finger. Or when we're reading from the, when we're reading from the Torah, we use a yad, a pointer, and not our finger directly. So that's the idea. Okay. It has been suggested, we go on, that these categories of ritual impurity were a response to the anxiety triggered by death, serious illness, and the leaking of life-generating fluids from the body. It has been noted further that natural flows require less purification than unnatural flows, which might indicate the presence of disease. Okay, so it's just saying it could be the anxiety of, whoa, what's going on with my body right here? And tum'ah and tahara, impurity and purification, are the responses to this anxiety. So when we are anxious while this unusual thing is happening to us, we are tameh. And once things have calmed down, we're not tameh anymore, and we can bring an offering to become pure, to mark formally the end of our the end of our anxiety. Okay, that's an interesting idea too. Okay, so I wanted to look at that. Now I want to turn ahead in the time that we have left to the next chapter, which is chapter 13, beginning on the bottom of 651. And just to introduce, just a second, Jan had a question to me.
Wow.
Is it that the Torah is tahor and we are not as holy and pure, so that's why we don't actually touch the Torah and make it tameh? I can't answer, Jan. I really can't. The concepts of everything that was in this commentary that I just read is pure speculation among all the other speculation from the commentators over the centuries. We really, really don't know how best to explain it. Okay, and there have been some modern commentators who've come up with some brilliant expositions about it. But again, it's just because the Torah is cryptic about it. It seems pretty clear something happens to our body. It puts us in the category of tameh, and tahor is the way to make us recover from that unusual thing. Yes, Sumner, I muted you before, so you have to unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. There you go.
I was just wondering if these concepts are unique to the Torah. Are there parallels in
so I think there are parallels in other religions, but I can't say for sure how directly they're connected. But I would say that there are within Christianity, only one who has been baptized can fully participate in ritual, right? And is that baptism a form of purification? I can't say for sure, but there is that sense that until one is baptized, one is not fully apart. And then there's something with consecration also. At some particular age, does it reflect education? Does it affect maturity? I don't know. Different denominations of Christianity might have different ideas about what consecration is. Also, different denominations of Christianity have different ideas of when baptism takes place. Does it take place as an adult? Does it take place as a child? Again, different. Islam has something like that. You have to take off your shoes before entering a mosque. Is it dirt that you're leaving behind, or is it tameh? There's this category like the shoe contains on it something that's tameh, and then you're entering holy space, pure space in the mosque itself. I don't know enough about Islam to say anything about that. So these are the things that are coming to mind, Sumner, in response to your question about are there analogies in other religions. I don't know if there's so the Torah is pointing out, times in which you have to sit isolated from other people, depending what's going on with your body. I don't know if that time of isolation is if you have that in Christianity or in Islam. I don't know. Okay, so let's take a look at the beginning of chapter 13 and what this Sara'at is. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe ve'el Aharon lemor. God spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, right? So childbirth was just to Moses. This part is now to Moses and Aaron. 652, 13 verse 2. Adam kihiyeh ve'or b'saro se'et o sapachat o vaheret v'hayav ve'or b'saro lenegat sara'at v'huva el Aharon hakohen o el achad mi banav kohanim. Okay, if a person has on the skin of his flesh, and now to translate this, I'll use the translation here, a swelling, se'et, swelling, sapachat, a rash, vaheret, a discoloration. Okay, so if you have on your skin swelling, rash, or discoloration, v'hayav or basaro lenegat sara'at, and it develops into a scaly affection. So that's what sara'at is translated as, scaly affection on the skin of his body. Okay, and then he would, if that happens, the person would be brought to Aaron the Kohen or to one of his sons, the Kohanim. Okay, so sara'at is the skin affliction. A metzora is a person who has the tzara'at. Okay, so the skin affliction, I'm just muting just because there are background noises. The skin affliction is a se'et, a swelling, a sapachat, a rash, or a vaheret, a discoloration. That then goes on to describe the different kinds of swellings, rashes, or discolorations that the Kohen would have to look at to designate as whether it's in the category of tzara'at, right? And so in other words, you get a blister, that's a swelling, but this is not a blister. So a blister is not, so a Kohen would see that it's a blister and say, this is not tzara'at. You go about your business, you're okay. It's only a certain kind. Is it a boil? Don't know what a boil looks like, but I'm not sure. Don't think that a boil applies here either. Okay, so it has to develop into tzara'at, which is translated as a scaly affection. Okay, so if the raised thing on your skin or the rash or the discoloration becomes scaly, according to our translation, it becomes sara'at. So again, we don't know exactly how to translate it. Then that is when the Kohen says, yes, this is in the category of sara'at, and now this is what you have to do. You have to be isolated until it goes away. And then once it goes away, then the chapter and the next portion describe the process of purification for that. So now, let's take a look below the line, beginning with verse 2, for the description here of this sara'at. Again, there's no behavior described here, right? A person, it doesn't say when a person has sinned tremendously, then a se'et, sapachat, or baheret will arise on the skin. It doesn't say that. It just says when this happens. So it could be a common occurrence, but it's nothing to do with behavior, according to the Torah. Okay, so below the line where it says number 2, so the bottom left column, despite a posture of sympathy for afflicted persons and a commitment to ameliorate their condition, the sages often could not resist the temptation to ask what moral or spiritual failing may have caused this illness. Again, why the rabbis have to say that? Well, maybe they want to teach us a lesson that the Torah doesn't necessarily teach us. In other words, the Torah the book of Leviticus is about the mundane elements of life. What we eat, last week's portion, what happens to our body, what happens when we relate intimately with our spouse, things like that. So it gets down to the nitty-gritty details of elements of life that the other books of the Torah don't really talk about. So Leviticus gets to behind closed doors. The rest of the Torah is about public spaces and our relationship with God in that public space. Okay, so I think it's the beauty of the Torah is that it includes these details for the behind closed doors stuff. And to understand that what happens behind closed doors in privacy, that what is used with the abbreviation TMI, too much information that people might be sharing about what's going on in their life. Leviticus responds to that. What happens with these disgusting things, right? Things that happen in the bathroom that we would never talk about in polite company. And for the Torah, that's important. That's life too. And there are elements of holiness and impurity in those elements of life. The rabbis take it a step further and apply moral teachings to it. Is that good that they're doing that? I don't know. But it develops a whole different kind of teaching about a particular kind of morality, and that is gossip. And they develop from here, so we'll get to it. Okay, so just the idea for the rabbis is to derive new lessons from the Torah that might not be there. And this is the classic example of that. Okay, what if we're just reading the Torah superficially, there would be no question that we might ask why this would happen to somebody, but the Torah doesn't ask the why. It just tells us what to do when it happens. So it answers the what and the when. It doesn't assume a why. That's an interesting question, Lori. Did the rabbis, when they taught about gossip, were they making it up, or was there some previous teachings about it? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think okay. There's a story of Moses and his sister and brother, and later in the book of Numbers, where the sister and brother are talking to each other. Miriam and Aaron are talking to each other about Moses's wife and describing her as a Cushite woman. And then Miriam is afflicted with Sara'at, the leprosy, this scaly affliction. So it's from there, because she gets the scaly affliction, after talking about Moses's wife, it's from that story in the Torah that the rabbis get the idea that anybody who gets this must have been gossiping. Now, I can understand them making that connection if they wanted to, but the Torah doesn't necessarily make that connection. So first of all, if we subscribe to the theory that people wrote the Torah and that there may be different schools of tradition for different aspects of the Torah, you have the priestly author of Leviticus versus the J or E author of Numbers. The P is in Numbers at some place, but I don't think the story of Moses and his sister and brother is a P story. It could be a J or E story. So then the J and E is independent of the P. Okay. Or even if you don't subscribe to that, the story of Miriam getting the skin affliction is seen as a punishment for speaking independent, unique to that event alone, not necessarily then to learn from something that happened in Numbers after the book of Leviticus, that we then apply that back to the book of Leviticus to say anybody who engages in gossip will then be afflicted with Tzara'at, and that's what the Torah is talking about here in Leviticus. I don't think you can make that logical argument, but the rabbis do. And there's one other case of this, and Moses gets leprosy on his hand, right? There are 3 signs that at the burning bush in which Moses gets proof that of God's existence and that this mission that he should embark on is from God. Right, Aaron did not get punished for that. It was only Miriam who got punished with the skin rash. Moses gets that skin rash too, and it says here because he suggests to God, maybe the people won't believe me when I go. So Moses daring to express doubt, he's afflicted with the leprosy also. So words used in the wrong way, either expressing doubt about your faith or God's existence, or engaging in gossip, could be sources for leprosy. And so the rabbis then generalize to anybody engaging in leprosy. It could also be later in the portion, Metzora talks about why a house, the walls of the house could have mold, what looks like mold on it, but Tzara'at, it's described as Tzara'at there too. That's to point out the person's lack of philanthropy, that only a miser would be afflicted with that rash on the walls of the house, causing the house to have to be destroyed, and then everybody's seeing how wealthy the person really is. So the rabbis, for their purpose, are teaching broader lessons about not engaging in gossip, which is, an element of community, keeping peace in the community, right? The more that there's gossip, the less that there's love and trust within the community. And if rabbis are trying to build love and trust and harmony, then they have to teach, don't engage in gossip. And if they want to teach that people need to take care of one another and to take care of the poor and the disadvantaged, well, you have to look to whatever lessons you can to try to reinforce that. So do you want your house to be knocked down and first to be afflicted with Tzara'at and then to be knocked down as punishment for being a miser? Well, don't be a miser, and then you'll never get Tzara'at in your house. Okay, so those are the reasons why the rabbis are coming up with based on this portion. But I just want to emphasize again, because we don't have time to look at it now, emphasize again that the Torah itself is assuming that these things happen to us, and the rabbis are expanding it to say what spiritual or personal faults should we be warned about, and should we stay away from. Okay, so it takes this purely medical, anatomical section and transforms it into a societal, spiritual lesson. Okay, so with that, anybody else have a question or comment to share? So with that, let's conclude for today. We'll continue next time. Next week's portion a little bit better to talk about than Tazria and Metzora. So I hope everybody has a good rest of the week. Enjoy the beautiful weather today and the next few days. Thank you
so
Brooke.
much.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
good
you.
rest of the day.
Good to see everyone.